Let me see where I can balance this water. Hi guys, my name's Kyle. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and full disclosure for singleness of purpose, a lot of my story involves a lot of different drugs. So I am giving you the forewarning in advance, and if you have a problem with it, you should take it up with your sponsor. Thanks so much. Thank you for introducing me, Jason. I have been very grateful to have the number and quality of people in my life because of this program, and I think it's a direct result of God pairing people together when it's right. So I'm very grateful for your friendship. All right. So full disclosure, I'm not just an alcoholic. I am a heroin, crystal meth, Xanax sex addict with an eating disorder. And so I like it all. And so I do full disclosure because I believe that is a manifestation of the disease of alcoholism and addiction. It just comes out in different ways. So I'm going to talk about all of it. I'm also going to talk about a lot of outside issues because they have not become so outside to me. So that's a part of my story. All right. I was born on June 18th, 1990 in Carrollton, Texas, to two lovely people. My dad is an immigrant from Cuba. His name is Juan Jesus Infante, and my mom is the whitest woman you've ever met. Her name is Nancy Ann Friday, and girl, born in Wisconsin, she is real white, and lots of privilege. And so she and my father met. I am my father's third child and my mother's first child, which is going to play a lot into enabling later on. So I had kind of an idyllic childhood. I come from a huge Cuban family. Parents were always there, very present. I have no complaints or any ill will towards my parents. They're absolutely incredible people, and that's why I believe in the disease and genetic component of alcoholism, because there was no trauma that could have led to it. It was purely, I was born like this, it happened, and I found something that was my solution. Really great childhood. I mean, parents were there, have a wonderful relationship with my brother. My sister also qualifies for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. She was not very present in my childhood, and I didn't really understand why. I just heard stories my whole life. Come to find out, when I was 8 years old and we moved into our new home, she came by and she let us know, hey, great to see you for the first time in 2 years. I'm pregnant with a man who's going to be in jail for the rest of his life. And P.S., I have multiple felonies for manufacture, distribution, conspiracy, trafficking, and prostitution. Can you buy me an attorney? And so my parents did. And I think it started to resonate to me. I didn't ever get mad like, oh my God, I can't believe you would do this. But the thought that went through my head was, we have such a huge family. I've never felt so loved and cared for in my life. Like, why would you leave? What was so good? And so that thought kept replaying in my mind. Now, I can talk about like all the basic alcoholic traits. I never fit in. I never felt like I belonged, which is all true, but it's almost like stereotypical to hear it. And I feel so like basic when I say it, like I didn't belong. Of course I didn't belong, you know? I'm a young gay kid in the deep South with my voice like way up here, and like, of course I didn't belong, right? And so a lot of my life, which is a very present theme in my story, is trying to fit in and just trying to cruise on through. Because if I don't make enough noise and I say just the right thing and I look the right way, then nobody will question me about all my insecurities. So like cruising under the radar, big thing of mine whenever I'm trying to like function in my alcoholism. So great childhood, sister went to prison. I started to notice I was different. Obviously, like melancholy at 8 years old, like disinterested with life and completely jaded, like these fucking people are so boring. I remember thinking that at like 9 years old in 4th grade, like this is so beneath me, which is so egotistical. But and then like also being gay, I was very aware very early on. I don't know if that's a common theme. I was aware, but just learned how to push it down and fly under the radar because I do come from a traditional Hispanic immigrant family. And there were two things you didn't do. You didn't date biracial and you didn't become gay. And my sister and I did both. So I had learned to just kind of assimilate and go with, right? Do what I needed to get by, keep on cruising through. And, that started to lead into like validation seeking from like a very early age. I thought I wanted to be a child actor, and so I made my mom take me to like acting lessons and got into movies and all of this like self-righteous driven shit from like a very early age. Like the need to be bigger and better and louder came up from a very early age, which is this dichotomy of wanting to blend in, but at the same time having this relentless need for attention, which is why I'm here. So I started to get a little too gay for my parents. And my dad thought like in middle school, like 6th grade, let's butch him up a little bit. Let's put him in football. Maybe that wrist won't be so limp. Maybe he'll get a little muscle. Maybe he'll lose some of his weight. Because I was like 180 pounds as a like 5th grader. I found my first release in food. And I was so uncomfortable. Because I'm thinking to myself like, I'm not very coordinated just in a general sense, so like trying to act and fly under the radar with a bunch of middle school kids, which just suck at a base level anyway, like middle schoolers are terrible, but then throw in a kid that they can bully, girl. And so the first day of football practice, I got jumped in the locker room and I sprained my neck and had a slipped disc. And so I went to the doctor who was kind enough to give me 10 milligram Percocet, so they were 10 by 325, then 6 milligram Flexeril, and then Scalaxin, which for somebody who feels an extreme sense of discomfort at a very early age, that'll make you real comfortable really quick. And so like I drank before, but I hadn't really experienced that release that we often talk about in that first drunk experience. So, I'd partied with my brother and like his older friends. They always took me to their parties because they thought it was a novelty to have like the drunk kid running around. And so I call my brother knowing that these pills that I got are good, and he's in college at this point. And so he instructs me to turn the lights off, sit on my beanbag, listen to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, take 3 of the Percocets, 1 of the Flexerils, chug it with a beer, and just listen to time as it starts to come on. And so, so not to glorify drug use, but I take the pills, I'm laying on this beanbag, and there's a very specific feeling with opioids where you feel like warm water's coursing through your entire body. And I could feel it from the tips of my toes to the top of my head. And for the first time in my life, I could breathe. I didn't care about what people thought about me. I didn't care how high-pitched my voice was. I didn't care how fat I thought I was. I didn't care about who I was in front of. For the first time, I felt stillness. And that was an elusive feeling that I began to chase for the next 12 years. That was the first time I felt like I connected. And I know this sounds like kind of cliche, but like that was my first spiritual experience. Like, for the first time, I felt completely present in my body because I wasn't so concerned about the judgment of others or the perceived judgment of others. And so that began a cycle that escalated very quickly. I'm taking a long time talking about like the preface, but so pharmaceuticals became my first outlet. I learned how to doc shop. I went on Arrowhead. I went on Blue Light. Like any good student, I'm going to do my research and I'm going to know what to do when I go into that doctor's office, and I'm going to get the right kind of pills. So I began to stock up. And I also come from a very, very privileged background where we did have great insurance, so the doctor was not a big deal. If I said it, my parents were present. They took me every time. And so that was my first form of a dealer or a liquor store. And it's covered by most major insurance providers. So, also becomes a theme later on that we'll talk about. So I started to dive really deep into pharmaceuticals. I'm not even in high school yet. It started to graduate because my tolerance started to increase. And my freshman year of high school was the first time I was introduced to heroin. Now, you know that feeling I talked about where I could breathe for the first time with opioids? For the first time, I didn't give a fuck about anything around me. The whole house could have burned down around me and I would have been fine. Completely dissociated and desensitized to any of my pain, my preconceived notions of what people were thinking or talking about me, or if I fit in, or if I didn't care if people liked me, I could just kind of float through life. And that was what I wanted. Like Jason said, I'm very quick and fast, and so I operate at like an 11 with constant fear and tension and like crippling anxiety. And so for an alcoholic like me, something that changed the way I felt so dramatically, bitch, that's all I needed. Like, I don't need anybody anymore. This is what I need. And what's terrifying is I remember thinking about that as a 13-year-old boy, which is like bizarre. Like, most 13-year-olds are thinking about like who they have a crush on or what their aim away message was going to be at the time. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, what font I was going to use. No, I'm more worried about like, do I use a 27 long or a 29? Gross. So, thus begins a descent. Shortly after, I started to have consequences because, again, I'm in high school, so I've got constant supervision of parents, teachers, and school counselors. So I start getting caught really early on. Get caught stealing out of the lockers of other kids in my school, grabbing credit cards, got kicked out and got put into what they called Compass, which was like juvenile detention school. Then I transferred out because I wouldn't make it to class. I went to some charter school, which is called Winfrey Academy. It's no longer functioning, but at the time we thought of it as the safe haven for teenage drug addicts and pregnant mothers alike. And so clearly I found this opportunity to find people that I could judge and then belittle and then start a cycle of gossiping and harsh thoughts and critiques on everyone as a way of climbing above them in my own head, because I knew how flawed and like ridiculous my behavior was. Was 2.5 years behind to convince my parents I wasn't gonna die early. I graduated at 16, got a grant from the state, went into college. At the time, I started to experiment with a nice young man who came from a lovely family, who was from my hometown. After a brief period of trying to stay sober off of opioids and drinking, I met this nice young man and we relapsed on opioids. And so he was my first boyfriend. And shortly after that, in January of 2007, he passed away from an overdose. And that experience taught me, get back in the closet, shut your mouth, fly right. Being gay and being a heroin addict didn't work out. We're gonna have to rewind the tape. So how can I fly under the radar now? By going back to prescriptions. Because my mind tells me if I try it a different way or a seemingly harm reduction side way, it'll be different this time. It was not. I started to continue to escalate with opioids, went to college, moved out of my parents' house, and things started to escalate even further. This was where alcoholism and drug addiction had become like an everyday, every hour thing, and I was waking up and I was using just to not get sick anymore. You know those shakes in the morning where like you violently just want to exorcist vomit everywhere? That's like every 45 minutes for me at this point, so it was not a good look at the time. This is where overdoses start to happen, and this is a really, really prevalent part of my story. I've been blessed by paramedics, EMTs, law enforcement, Narcan, highly recommend it, controversial opinion, take it up with your sponsor if you don't like it, it saves lives. Start going into treatment centers at this point and trying to pick easier, softer ways and always having exceptions of what I was willing to do, right? Like, I'll quit benzos and opioids, but I'm not gonna stop drinking. I'll quit drinking, but I'm not gonna quit smoking blunts. Like all of these bargaining and pick and choose things because I was so resistant to the idea that I had to listen to somebody else. And I continually got worse and worse consequences. Something to bring up at this time, I had inherited an obscene and disgusting amount of money from my family, which was like kerosene on an already burning dumpster fire, and just sent me into a spin where I was never out of resources. I always had access to funds, so therefore I could get as high as I whenever I wanted, however I wanted, and without the responsibility of worrying about who gave me the money, because it was mine. And within 4 years, it was gone. My husband commonly says, we wouldn't have to work if you would have saved your fucking money. But I remind him I probably wouldn't have met him if I still had the money. So, lose-lose situation either way. We're either broke, or we're struggling, or we're working our ass off, or we have a ton of money and we would have never met, as is life. Start going into treatment centers, graduate from college, get my dream job out of college, burn it down to the ground, as we do, come back and try and start getting jobs in Dallas, trying to scrape by while hopping in and out of institutions, ERs, ambulances, overdoses, parents finding me face down on the ground, like in different apartments, hopping from couch to couch, because now I was unemployable, intolerable from a social perspective, and I would probably have to use every 45 minutes at this point just to not be sick anymore. It was not fun. I had lost all of my friends' family. I vividly remember one particular Christmas where my dad looked at me because I had had another great incident, made a real great family memory, and he told me it would just be easier if you died. And to them, I'm sure it was, because they're constantly spending money, they're constantly bailing me out, they're saving me, totaled car here, ambulance there, failed job there, friends calling them in crisis because I'm face down at Beauty Bar or Barcadia at the time, and they're having to arrange for me to be taken care of. I'm a walking liability to everyone in my life at this point, because that obsession is so looming. I was the type of guy who could not wake up in the morning without thinking about drinking, and would have this constant firm resolution every day. I would throw away all the paraphernalia, all the bottles, everything I had, and be like, today's the day, I'm gonna do it, and make up so many different reasons or excuses as to why this would be the day it would stick. And invariably by 9:30 in the morning, I was on the phone and in the car and doing what I did, and just a really, really lonely, sad, dark time. I didn't get sober under the worst circumstances of my life. I'd run out of money. At this point in 2012, placed myself in a position to get hurt, and accumulated a pretty large drug debt, and unfortunately was the victim of a sexual assault, and was left battered, bruised, and without any of my belongings in a hotel in a very, very strange part of Dallas, and remember thinking how defeated and gross and terrified I was, and then the next morning calling that exact same drug dealer because he had the best shit. And that's, I think, to me, the definition of what we talk about in the book of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Because despite being victimized and having been put in a position that no human being should ever have to be in, the next morning I call the exact same perpetrator because I need to get right, and I'm willing to sacrifice whatever pride and ego and dignity I have to do so. At this point, it's getting really dark. Family and friends have completely disowned me almost because, again, I'm a liability. I am struggling just to maintain what I have. I'm trying to fly under the radar and keep up with appearances and see people, but every time it would just get worse and worse and more uncomfortable. And so a lot of my days before I got sober were usually just spent in my car by myself, driving around because no one would be around me. And whenever the drug dealer doesn't even want to be around you and you've got accessible funds, that's you are gross. So I was that man. In June of 2013, it was an extra hot summer. I was driving around back and forth from Fort Worth to Dallas, flipping shit and not using my degree, bouncing from drug dealer's house to drug dealer's house, and just trying to spend my days and wondering would it just be easier if I did overdose? And I didn't have the balls to do it, and I thank God for that. But, it was just this Groundhog Day of misery. After I lost the last job in my previous industry, I worked in advertising before, and like if you get fired in advertising, like you have to have your shit so wheels off. People walk in there every day like fucked up on Adderall, drinking at 9 a.m. in the morning, and so like to be the guy that they walk out in boxes, and I'm like a 20-year-old, disgusting. Like makeup pouring down off of my face because I'm trying to hide the dark circles because I look like Skeletor. At this point, I'm 109 pounds. I'm using amphetamines just to stop eating because the eating disorder has become so prevalent that if I look the right way and I sound the right way and I present the right way, maybe I'll slide through the cracks. Not working. I'm putting concealer on my arms and using hairspray just to cover up the tracks, and like I am floating through life, not even existing, but just being physically present in the rooms that I'm inhabiting. And after a particularly rough night and a particularly rough run, my mom and my brother allowed me to come back to the house and ask me, "Are you gonna do something different?" And I said, "I don't know." Because at this point, I can't tell you yes or no on any of the decisions I'm making. I lie every time I say it. So I don't want to lie. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to get sober. And after sitting in my parents' house dope sick for 7 days because they locked the door, they took away my keys and my phone, and they just let me ride it out train spotting style upstairs at their house in Coppell, my mom thought it would be fun to allow me to test my treatment centers that I was going to this time and tour them. Like, what? I tried to use that as an opportunity to find like the lightest, breeziest, and most luxurious one. I'm like, I want a gym and want to come back like tan and fit. I want to make this an insurance vacation. Well, my mom did not let me take the insurance vacation. She found a boot camp in Austin, Texas that was a 12-step big book militia. It was gender specific, so I couldn't get away with boys and girls. I had to get along and play nice with the men that I was around. And it was far enough away where I couldn't AMA and then call a taxi or Uber my way back. I was gonna have to be committed. So on July 6th, 2013, my mom and my dad loaded me up in my mom's company car for the very last time. In typical alcoholic fashion, I said, "Fuck you, you fucking bitch," and was smoking cigarettes in her car the entire time. Meanwhile, the saint of a woman is driving me down. And the last thing that I remember is like right before she dropped me off because she knew how miserable I was, I used to listen to like really obnoxious rap, and so she was like, "Do you want to listen to UGK?" Because that's what kind of my mom is. And so we listened to International Players Anthem, and she knew every word to the Andre 3000 part, and did that for me. And that's like the love that I get to experience with no regard to how I show up. That's God's grace, and I'm extremely blessed to have that. And so I pulled up to a little treatment center on July 6th, 2013, terrified, scared, bewildered, 109 pounds on fall risk because I'm still technically detoxing off of benzos, black arms bruised, and as of now, that's been the date that's stuck. And that's pretty remarkable for a drug addict like me. So now we can all breathe, the hard part's over, there's no more trauma, abuse. It's all uphill from here, ladies and gents, so everybody just take a deep breath, because there's not going to be any more sexual assault discussed from here, at least not directly impacting me. Because girl, y'all know what room you're in, we all got trauma. So I get sober, and my experience with the steps were dramatic and drawn out, if you ask me, because it took a little while for the cobwebs to clear out. My first step was extremely clear: powerless against drugs, alcohol, and pretty much anything that produces dopamine, and my life had become unmanageable. And that was evident in my actions and my relationships. And what my program therapist described to me at that treatment center was that the unmanageability wasn't so much about the physical circumstances, because we all got some dirty shit we got to clean up, like in terms of situations. It was more about like, what does that internal condition look like? Can I be still with myself? Can I sit in a room quietly without TV or music and just be present? Am I comfortable in my own skin? And I could unequivocally answer no to all of those things. I felt like a passenger through this life, and I had no direction. And that establishment of powerlessness was the first admission I needed to take to be able to actually accept the reality of my situation. Like, I understood for myself, I cannot comfortably use drugs or alcohol in any form without consequence. And so my second step, I had a very lucky childhood in the sense that I didn't have a ton of religious trauma. My dad was raised Catholic because he was a Cuban, and once he watched his mother die of a pretty horrific brain tumor, he started to question what God would allow this, and so he recoiled from religion. My mom's always had a ton of faith, and she just said, whatever will get you in the door, which is ironic because that's what everybody told me about AA too. Whatever will get you in the damn door. And so she would bribe us with donuts, which may or may not have led to binge eating disorder. But you want to be treated right? Eat. And which is why I still get excited when the Uber Eats arrives in front of our house. But, like that lack of religious trauma, I was able to conceive my own perception of God in a really loving and all-encompassing way. And what I had misunderstood for many years was that I had been told by people that were part of religious culture that no one would accept me because I was gay, or no one would accept me because I was a drug addict or a thief and stole all of the money that I could get access to from my parents, or like a liar or a cheater or any of these things. And then that same program therapist asked me a very simple question. Is that the God you believe, or is that the God that you've been told to believe? And that was a monumental and transformative experience because I didn't understand that I could create my own concept of God. So I got a very simple assignment to write down what I thought God was, which for me was judgmental, transactional, intolerant, punishing, that if I make a mistake, I will reap the repercussions. And the God that I was willing to believe was loving and compassionate and empathetic and understanding and really just summed up in love. Like when I experience love, I experience the closest thing that I get to God. And that was enough of a concept to start. Third step. So because I went to a boot camp, I was taught to memorize that paragraph on page 62, and I can still recite it, and it sounds really militant and really, really fanatical and like almost evangelical, and I can do it, but I don't do it anymore because my concept of recovery has grown. But that third step proposition and, omission of selfishness and self-centeredness, I had always been under the misconception that life happened to me. And I had never been told that I have to take responsibility for my actions in life, that I can't be reactive and I can't blame things on other people. And, selfishness had shown up in my entire life. Just the need of having to change the way I feel because I'm so uncomfortable and dissatisfied with the people and things around me in and of itself is a selfish action for me because I'm trying to check out and because I don't respect the people or things around me enough to be sober for them, right? The third step kind of scared me because this idea of turning my will and my life over to the care of God sounded really heady, right? And like from here on out, I was going to have to be a Buddhist monk and life would be stupid, boring, and glum, And in my head, I was thinking like, I'm never going to have hot, passionate sex again. I'm never going to be happy. I'm never going to feel like I fit in. I have to be constantly serving like Mother Teresa on hand and knee. And obviously, that's not been my experience. But, I delayed that step, and everybody at the treatment center would, heckle me and, rag on me, and I was already oppositional defiant when I got there. I may or may not have thrown a chair at somebody, and the lead therapist said, we don't want you here anymore, so just die already, after I threw said chair. So they had, a lot of ammo to come at me with if I wanted to be, prima donna and take my time on step work. So, side note. So I had staph infection and MRSA in my hand and neck. I had a needle lodged in my right arm and didn't tell anybody until I was there. And I was surprised, how we're doing CrossFit every day? I can feel the needle scraping on the inside of my right arm. So can we get an x-ray? Turns out it was there. It was lodged, had to have surgery. They told me that I may or may not have to explore options with my hand because the abscess had grown to about yay high, yay wide, and it was like open, and I called it Old Faithful because it was a direct shot. Never had to think about it. Never had to tie off, straight on in. Very Requiem for a Dream. It was gross. And so then the reality and the consequences of my decisions caught up to me. I had to go into surgery and have all that taken care of. And like a good alcoholic, as soon as the consequences are literally waiting on you in the pre-op room, the weight of the world hits me. I start bawling, crying, saying, I don't want to lose my hand. I don't want to lose my arm. I don't want to do this. I'm only 23. This can't be my life. And being super dramatic, which if y'all can't tell is a theme in my life. And the tech said, I think we've got a shot now. So I grabbed my hand. We did the third step prayer in the pre-op room. I'm bawling. I'm having this foxhole prayer moment, which do not recommend, just happens to be my experience. Go into surgery, everything comes out, I have all my appendages clearly, and afterwards the tech said, well, any good third step is followed with immediate and thorough writing, so we're gonna give you a notebook and lock you in a room, and you're gonna finish Resentment, Sex, and Fear. By the way, it was the right arm, so I'm writing left-handed, so good luck reading it. So I finished that. My fourth step experience was profound, but it was a lot of rehashing things that I'd been scared to talk about. And I think that there's this expectation that I hear a lot about with sponsees that I don't want to write and I don't want to think about it and I don't need to know it. I already know what I did. So it's not about rehashing that. It's about getting a different perspective, and that is something that I had lacked. I was too busy looking at myself to be the victim. I'm the youngest kid. I'm my mom's only biological son. They would call me pobrecito, which in Spanish means poor little boy. And I loved it, because then that means I could cry and get whatever I wanted. And so that becomes a theme, right? And so as I'm writing that fourth step, I look at how much of my life has been spent acting like a victim. Acting like I am in constant self-pity, how I deserve to be taken care of, how I expect people to show up in a way that I could never show up as. And my experience showed that explicitly. I could write about the drug dealer or losing Carter or, all of these things, or getting jumped, or, all of the different disappointments that I had in my life. But the common denominator was that I consistently placed myself in a position to be hurt, and I consistently stepped on the toes of my fellows and they retaliated, seemingly without provocation. See, I can still recite it. And, I started to get this new perspective of how I show up and the ripple effect that I have in all my relationships. I did not realize how deep-seated my fear was. I still make a joke that I suffer from crippling anxiety and laugh about it to make light of it, but it's true. I still wake up when I'm in untreated alcoholism like a dope fiend, jump out of the bed at 5:30 or 6 in the morning and start in panic. And that is how I experienced life. And I got to put those fears on paper and got to see exactly the extent of how they held me back in my life. And how irrational, illogical, and emotional I would lash out on people. And then sex. So, like I mentioned, I'm a sex addict, and I did not know that at this time, so a lot of it was really base level. And it was, just where did I cause harm? Is suspiciousness, bitterness, or jealousy, all are the base level, but I didn't see the impact of how I treated those men and women. And I kind of grazed through it, doing just bare minimum to get by in that part, because I don't think I was ready to address that. Fifth step, so I did my fifth step with 3 different people, and it says we feel we are on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe, and that was a gradual experience. That was not an immediate burning bush experience. My entire sobriety has been the educational variety. 6 and 7. So they may have 2 paragraphs in the book total, but I think that they are some of the most profound steps, because we look at, are we willing to give up these character defects? Am I truly ready to do that? And, the basic ones that we talk about all the time and that I was able to readily identify that were negative, yes, I will stop cheating, I will stop lying, I will stop stealing, I will stop being violent, I will stop being aggressive. I can see the immediate impact. I'm here to report that today there are still character defects that I've clung to pretty difficultly. And I mean, like, validation seeking, attention, social media, extraction of what I need from other people. Like, those are things that have become present to me and have come into my awareness, and it's been a slow give. I'm doing the best I can, so we'll just approach every little thing one step at a time. 7, like that honest omission and asking God to be rid of these things. I still have to do it. That's my morning routine, and like I'll get into 10, 11, and 12, but 7 is a practice in honesty and authenticity and transparency with God, which is like the most important relationship we have, right? It's the only one that sticks by, that we know with confirmation will carry us through our entire lives. 8 and 9, ton of amends that I needed to make. Obviously, family, friends. The most powerful amends that I made was that young man's mother, and apologizing and saying I'm sorry and accept responsibility for your son's passing and facilitating and providing those drugs. And I know I can't bring your boy back, but what can I do to make this right? And she promptly told me, never talk to my family again and never do heroin again, because you get to have Christmas with your mom and dad. I don't get that anymore. You get to have family photos and you get to have life experiences. I don't get that anymore. So think about that and remember that. And it's still difficult and rough and tough. And I mean, I do think, unfortunately, though, it's a part of the lifestyle that we lead in this group and this program, because many of the people that I love and care about deeply have passed away to the disease. And it doesn't really get easier, but it helps me feel more at peace about what's happened by being present for other people now, in the hope that maybe they don't die. 10, 11, and 12 is where I live. I would like to say that I take inventory promptly. It usually waits until I'm in complete panic mode, and then I dial one of those guys back there and lose my shit. 11, prayer and meditation. That's by far one of the key cornerstones of my program, like constant contact with God and maintaining that relationship. And 12 has had such a profound impact on my life. Step work and sponsorship and working with my sponsor, it's changed my whole world. I never felt useful or like I had inherent worth before, because I thought everything I could contribute to life was very transactional, and now I see that I have meaning and purpose, and that God's given me a reason, you know? Okay, so I'm gonna power through this because I am like right at time. So I get sober, real social in Austin, Texas, and there are a ton of really pretty fit gay boys. And so I get real social. And what I also didn't realize is that once that first manifestation, that life-threatening issue of drugs were removed, the eating disorder and sex addiction revved up in full force, because I was in untreated alcoholism in these areas I had not brought to God. And within 10 months, I was checking into another treatment center for those outside issues. And I was talking about this with Bo on the way here. You know, everybody asks, like, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you, like, gonna make it through? And they're like, oh, are you all right? Can we, like, be there for you? How are you doing, really? And I'm like, I'll tell you how I'm doing. Not fucking well, so stop asking. Just leave me in the back of the room, and we're gonna address all these things, but give me a little bit of space. And what I found is that lack of space in Alcoholics Anonymous is everybody pulling each other closer because they can see how vulnerable we are. And as irritating as it has saved my life. Go to treatment, get out, start working in the industry, which I thought was ironic because I had taken so many insurance vacations that now I can help people on theirs. And so that's what I call treatment for, like, repeat offenders. Like, if you've been to treatment a few times, I'm like, girl, you're just on an insurance vacation. You're not going to have a different experience here. So started to work in the industry, met a very nice boy in a different city, and started a long-distance relationship. It was actually ironic because we met at a meeting right down the road off Reagan Street at CMA. I was in town visiting an ex-boyfriend. He told me that he was dating a nice young man. I told him I was not interested in that, but who's your cute friend, Bo? Needless to say, I do not talk to that man anymore because he was pretty salty about that, but it worked out for me, so selfishness does pay off. Started to date him, really helped me expand my understanding of life and how I show up, and my marriage and my relationship is probably the key place of where I get to see all of my character deflects reflected at me, but I could not be more grateful for the man that I have married and built a life with. So we get serious. I move back to Dallas because he's got a business and I don't, and I'm like 24 at this point, so it's like, come on, dude. You're the one with freedom. He can't really do anything. He's fixed to a city. He's got an established, industry. So I come to Dallas, don't know anyone. And the last time I lived here, I was shooting heroin off Walnut Hill and 35 at some sketchy gas station. So everything feels very uncomfortable. I religiously met at the Lambda off of Butler and stuck in the rooms and started to build a community, and found my way back into advertising, got recruited into my current industry of behavioral health care, and started, it was so weird. I moved back to Dallas to then be recruited by an Austin facility that I was working for in Austin, but doing it remotely, but going in every other week. It was fucking crazy, but loved it. And it sparked this purpose and desire, and it blurred the lines between my program and my work. And so I would put myself all in on that because I felt like I had to, as my primary purpose is to help the still suffering alcoholic, and that got really blurry, and it got blurry for many years. But when I got married, we got married at the courthouse, and it was because it was right after the last president was elected, and we were concerned about Supreme Court legislation, so we bit the bullet and got the tax write-off, and it still worked out through COVID, so highly recommend. Got a pretty incredible opportunity offered to me and left that treatment center for Austin and started working and operating a facility. And so you know how I talked about flying under the radar and preserving appearances. This situation showed me how to grow in this through an immense amount of pain, because I had to experience growing up and understanding, not only how much of my identity I derive out of front-facing things and how much I put on, but also how willing I am to compromise my values in order to achieve that rush and that extracting validation. And, while I have since found a completely new job and have entered a different area of this industry, I am incredibly grateful for that experience because it gave me a firsthand look into the world of what I do from a completely different perspective. I mean, it was fucking painful at the end, and it was rough, but had I not done that, I would not have been able to do the things that I do. And so I'm immensely grateful for that. Then last year, Pandy the pandemic hit. That's what we call it in our house. We try and refer to it as a nice person name instead of just being bitter, because we had vacations booked. We had this whole year, and then, like everybody else, we're not unique, but the world shut down. And it really strengthened my relationship with God, my program as a whole with Alcoholics Anonymous, and all of my closest relationships. And, I feel very blessed to have had the program and the people around me, because I've seen so many people go out, and I've lost many, many friends since COVID started, and so I'm immensely grateful and understand how serious this is. I talked about loss earlier, and I've had a few really, really tragic losses of people that I care about deeply. One of which happened about a month ago, a guy that I kind of built my career with at the same time, and we were at the same organization, and our lives started to get really big, and God was really present, and in a blink of an eye, he was gone, and he left a wife and 2 children in a treatment center and an entire world behind him. And it just reminds me how serious this is and how fucking important it is to get outside help if you need it. Outside help. I'll end on this. So, like I said, I qualify for multiple groups, and I have found that outside help is necessary for me. I'm actively in therapy. I am constantly in action with my sponsor. I stay close to my sponsees. I try and be present, but I need more. And so I have had to get on different medications in the past year, change my whole fucking world. And I highly recommend to y'all, if you need outside help, do not be in fear. Do not feel shame. I think it's important to note that we are living in unprecedented times, and so our circumstances have changed a little bit than the way that they may have been depicted in the book, and I think it's important that if you feel uncomfortable, say something and do something about it. There's no need to feel miserable in this room with us. We've got your back. What life looks like today is I am safe and protected, and I have an amazing group of people, and I feel loved and appreciated, and I feel love around me. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor, and we are extremely invested in our group and our program and our people. And two of the people from my lineage are right back there, and they become parts of my family. My sponsees are like my family to me, and I love them more than they know. And I feel very blessed to have the sponsorship that I have, because I don't think I would have made it without the people around me. Before I wrap up, we do this little retreat every year, or used to before the world shut down. And there's this last paragraph that I think describes my experience with Alcoholics Anonymous and my story completely. It says, each of us here this weekend, or this evening even, is a result of high pressure and temperature bonding us like a diamond. And as we have grown, we become exquisite and unique diamonds that we can see and hear and feel. Diamonds with skin on. We are bonded with each other, or we will be. We have become multifaceted and brilliant, becoming a vital and important part of this ever-repeating network of sobriety, of recovery, and love. See, God never wastes anything. Thank you, guys.